A man named Aksionov was a merchant in this little town of Vladimir, Russia, and he was well respected around town, and people knew him and liked him, thought well of him. He wasn't perfect. He had his flaws. For instance, Aksionov liked to drink too much. Now, he wasn't a violent drunk or anything like that, but he wasn't perfect. He's just an ordinary person. And when we lived in England, people would say he was a bloke, just an ordinary bloke. That's not how Tolstoy described him. Tolstoy describes him as this typical Russian merchant. One day, Aksionov decided to go to a nearby town where they were holding a fair to engage in some business. The morning of his departure, his wife came to him. She was all upset. She said, "Don't go, don't go. I had this terrible nightmare. And I imagined that you had turned all gray and were in some kind of trouble and you looked terrible." He waved his hand. "Get out of here, woman. I'm going to only be gone a few days. Don't worry, nothing bad will happen." I said he wasn't perfect. Could have responded more graciously, but that's my commentary. Along the way, as he went along the road, he met another merchant heading in the same direction. They began to strike up a conversation, were getting along, and the fair was more than a day's journey away, so they decided they would stop at the same place that evening. After checking into the inn, they dined together and drank pretty heavily, and then late in the evening, they retired to their rooms. The next morning, Aksionov got up and he said, I'm going to go ahead and set out because I'm not sure the other guy's going to be ready to go quite yet. So he set out on his path, but not long after he left, some police officers came up and stopped him, asked him about the merchant with whom he had been traveling. Aksionov told them what he knew, but he said he hadn't seen the guy since the previous night. Then one of the officers explained that someone killed his fellow traveler. Aksionov was shocked. And they said, "Can we search your bag?" He said, "Of course." He was standing there just in astonishment. And as they opened it, right in the top, they saw a bloody knife. He screamed, "That's not mine." Well, they arrested him, and in spite of his continued pleas of innocence, he went through a trial and a sentencing, and before he was to be sent to Siberia for his sentence, he was flogged. After his flogging, he was allowed to see his wife, and this was the first time since that day of arrest that he saw his wife. The stress of the day of his arrest, the interrogation, the trial, and his sentencing had indeed begun to gray his hair. So she saw him, and he looked terrible, and his hair had begun to gray. He spent the next 26 years in Siberia, and while serving his sentence, Aksionov became a well-respected prisoner. He mediated disputes between other prisoners and showed how light can even penetrate the darkness of a prison in Siberia. One day, among the new arrivals was a prisoner named Makar Semyonich. Semyonich seemed to be evil even by the standards of a Siberian prison. Aksionov overheard Semyonich telling of his exploits and bragging about how he had gotten away with so much for so long before eventually getting caught. It seemed like their paths had crossed before, but Aksionov could not think about where. Finally, he figured out that it was Semyonich who had killed the other merchant. He struggled with what to do with this information. His rage burned for the 26 years he had spent in Siberia, and each night for several weeks he would lie in his bed praying to God to take away this rage, to calm his troubled heart. One day, Aksionov noticed some dirt under a shelf. And he went over, and as he stooped to look, Semyonich came crawling out. Said, "Just you keep quiet. You keep quiet, old man, and if you keep your mouth shut, you'll get out too. But if you blab, they're going to flog the life out of me, but before they do, I swear I will kill you." Aksionov looked at his enemy and said, "You killed me a long, long time ago." Then he sort of looked around, half turning his back to Semyonich, and said, "As for whether or not I will tell, God alone knows." The next day, some soldiers noticed the dirt under the shelf, and the prison erupted. Suddenly, soldiers were buzzing everywhere, tearing everything apart, looking for the culprit who had started this tunnel out of the prison. The governor of the prison questioned different prisoners, and at last turned to Aksionov, who he knew to be a just and honest man. And he said, "You're a truthful old man. Tell me, before God, who dug this hole?" Here was his moment. Aksionov thought about what to say. He knew they would kill the one who had been trying to escape, but he also thought about his suspicion. He realized, I don't know beyond a shadow of doubt that Semyonich was the one who killed the fellow traveler and framed me. He finally said, "I can't say, Your Honor. It's not God's will that I should tell. Do what you like with me. I am in your hands." Things sort of calmed down. They couldn't figure out who had been digging the tunnel. And that night, Aksionov was laying in his bed, and he felt an answer to his prayer. He felt a sense of peace. But in the darkness, he saw somebody coming to his bed, and soon he recognized it was Semyonich, and he was all upset. He begged for Aksionov to forgive him. He cried out, "Ivan Aksionov, forgive me. For the love of God, forgive me. I'll confess that I was the one who killed the merchant, and you will be released and can go to your home." This is Leo Tolstoy's story, God Sees But Waits. Every one of us has difficulties. We face troubles, we face trials, we face incredible things. I mean, it's obvious to cite the pandemic coming out of 15 months and how it's impacted everybody. But beyond that, there are things that we all have to wrestle with. When we hear about Jesus feeding the 5,000 or walking on water, it's easy to take this message. God can overcome our problems. God can do it. That's the point of John's stories. That's the point of all the signs and miracles in John. Whatever we face, God can overcome it. The problem comes from the way we read these biblical narratives. We find it harder to see the divine potential than to see Jesus solving it by flipping a switch. They were hungry, he fed them. We're susceptible to a sort of theological transference. And we apply the same notion to our situation. If he could feed the hungry, he can fix my problem as I understand it. If he can feed the hungry, he can make it all better. Transference is the psychological principle of applying an experience from one situation directly without any adjustment to another. It becomes theological when we read about these miracles, like feeding many, many people, or walking on water, and then we just directly put it into the context of our lives. Yet the miracles of John were all about John's purpose. This was about what John was trying to say. The miracles were about showing Jesus is the Savior of the world, and he is capable of overcoming everything, including death. In Tolstoy's story, we could join Aksionov in his frustration as he was lying in his bed and thinking about those 26 years of life in a Siberian prison. When Semyonich first came to him and offered to confess his guilt, Aksionov said, "Don't bother. My life as it was before I was arrested is over." That wasn't the point, though. See, Tolstoy was showing that Aksionov was the same person before and after. Thus, in prison, he even made it a better place. Light shines in the darkness. Love overcomes hate. Each one of us can grow wherever we're planted. We can be the miracle to those around us. We can be the miracle they need to see when God works through us, when the light of Christ shines in our lives. We might not be able to walk on water. We absolutely can't walk on water, so don't anybody go out and try it. We will fall in and sink. Instead, we can live out our calling no matter where it takes us. Jesus fed those people because he was there and they were hungry. There's more to it than that. There's always more to it than that in John. There are all these multiple layers of meaning. But sometimes the simplest explanation isn't a bad one. For us, when we find obstacles to shining in the darkness, Jesus can overcome them and then work through us. We're participants in God's presence and God's work in the world. In the end of Tolstoy's story, Semyonich does confess, even though Aksionov protested. The authorities believed him and ordered Aksionov's release. But when the release order arrived at the prison, he had already passed away peacefully in his sleep. We don't know the story of our lives. We don't know the future. We don't know how, let alone tomorrow, we don't know how today is going to turn out. We don't know if we get to see the fruit of our labor. All we can do is live in faith and trust that God is God. And I hope this isn't a shock for anybody, but we're not. Be God's hands and feet in the world. Christ overcame the power of death and lives within each one of us. We know that love is more powerful than hate, and we can shine even in the darkest moments of light. God is love, and love overcomes all and shines in the darkness. Amen.